Hello there, sword friends. I have another odd one to share with you from the old collection. This is something from Apocalyptic Bladeworks. I hope I'm saying that name correct, but I'll put a link in the description down below to the Smith's Facebook page. If you're so inclined to order one yourself or something like it, I can provide those details. This is a custom piece that I got secondhand, so do note that it is not in the condition that was sent out from Apocalyptic Bladeworks. There's some blemishes along the blade, and I also understand that these Dremel marks, they're not speed holes. They don't make the blade go faster, but as I understand it, this was a blackened blade originally, and it's been shined up in such a way that it no longer really represents kind of the original creation. Anyway, this, speaking of original creation, is supposed to be a Lord of the Rings inspired type of fantasy sword, and there's some weapon from that movie, Gurthang, not movie, but book, that is famous. It's a blackened blade, and hence the blade was blackened, and supposedly the blade was taken and reforged into this orcish prince weapon is at least kind of the spirit of the fantasy element that was used to create this, or at least that's the story as I recall it. Anyway, this is a unique and interesting piece. Whether or not it applies to kind of that fantasy element, I don't know, because I don't know the Lord of the Rings kind of lore well enough to really say. But I can say this looks rough and orcish, and some of the imperfections kind of lend itself to the character of the blade, and I can at least share with you the unique and interestingness of this particular thing. Dynamically and cutting and all that kind of stuff, I don't know that it makes sense to really talk too much about it, because it's not meant to be a usey piece, it's meant to be a smashy, orky, cool-looking piece. Anyway, I digress. I will talk more about it. So the end cap here, the pommel, this little ring bit here, well, it is peened, and you might be able to spot that down at the end here. But more importantly, this little circular section is supposed to be made out of shibuichi. Shibuichi being an alloy that's made out of copper and silver, at least as I understand it. It can be made in different proportions, and I've seen them on Japanese-style fittings. They can often turn like a deep green or gray or sometimes black. This has maintained a more copper-esque kind of color, so I'd venture a guess that it's more copper than silver. At least I don't know what proportions were used. Anyway, that's supposed to be what it's made from, and I like the oblong shape, and I think in terms of the spirit of an orcish cleaver that this actually kind of hits the mark. It's got this rough and tumble kind of hammered surface, I should say, along with kind of an oblong asymmetric shape to it, and I think it does definitely capture the spirit there. This peen looks like it was an enormous pain in the ass to do, so tip of my hat to Apocalyptic Bladeworks for getting it on there. Now that said, it is a little bit loose. It does have some minor movement. You can't probably hear it, but the guard and fitting have loosened over time, and that kind of brings me to a point here where I can show you there is like some fishing wire kind of wrapped around here, which hopefully you're able to see in some way. It doesn't certainly lend itself to the character of the blade, and I don't find it particularly orcish, but I'm guessing it was placed there to try and mitigate the rattly kind of movement that I'm feeling in the blade. Whether it was there from the factory or the original owner or some other owner, I don't know. It looks like an addition to me, some homeowner solution, but nevertheless, it's a little unsightly and kind of detracts from the overall experience. Honestly, if it were like leather bits or shims or something, it would almost fit the bill, but this is a little unsightly with the fishing wire. There's some leather riser and then a brass spacer. I think that's brass, and then we have some horn. I don't know if they're ferrels or spacers that are on the grip, and they fit well. They do good to separate your hand. And honestly, for as bulky and chunky as this thing is, it's really not uncomfortable to grip. No part of it bites me, so despite it being made to be orcish and crudish, it at least feels pretty good in the hand. The rattle's also not terribly noticeable. I mean, I kind of noticed it while I went out here to talk about it, but it's very minor. There's leather on the Turk's head knots here on either side of the grip. The grip is supposedly rosewood wrapped in Italian leather. Whether or not that's true, I have no idea. I don't know what makes Italian leather better or different or special, but anyway, it is at least interesting, and you can see that they kind of change direction slightly on different bits of the grips. There's not a lot of rounding or taper to the grip. Obviously, it's pretty square chunk. It is elliptical though, so I can at least tell where the edge is, which is, I suppose, important, though I don't know how important it honestly is. It feels like it would hurt if I hit you with the flat end as well. The crossguard is a unique shape. It's got this kind of fishhook looking design, and it is made with kind of a cable Damascus, I believe is what it was. So it has a pretty unique and interesting pattern to it, but there are some imperfections here, and I don't know if those lend themselves character or not. To me, this one is character rich. This one looks like a flaw with this open weld. Now, it hasn't come apart, it hasn't loosened or anything, but this is a little scarier, but it hasn't come apart. Anyway, as we go up here, there's some other blemish spots, you might say. These look like they were forged in. I guess I don't know if that's the case originally, but again, this is supposed to be a rough and tumble kind of crude orc weapon, and so some of these I would expect and I think add character, though this part down here on the base of the guard looks just like an open weld and is a little scary. I feel like it's going to chip off, though it doesn't move, and I can get my fingernail in there, but it doesn't come apart even if I try to pry it a little bit. The blade, again, this was supposed to be a blackened blade. It was supposedly made out of 1075. I say 1075 because I don't really know what it's made from and I have no way of validating, but the smith there said that it was 1075, and if it were blackened, I think that would probably, to me, look a little better. I don't know. I don't necessarily mind it in this color either. It's a big, rough and rugged-looking kind of kukri, copish, odd axe-looking rough blade, and it definitely feels the part. This is a heavy blade. In one hand, it feels like it wants to jump out of your hand. In two hands, it's not so bad, but not something exactly that you'd want to fence with. I digress. It's a unique and interesting blade. I don't have anything quite like it, and it is certainly a fantasy-inspired piece, so it's not supposed to be, obviously, a battlefield weapon. It's supposed to tell a story and be a piece of fantasy, and to that end, I think it does the job. It is also sharp and seems very functional, but not necessarily as a refined weapon of history, but as a interesting functional prop, if you will. The edge is reasonably sharp, but not terribly so. Kind of more towards at this tip area here. Down at the base, it's not so much. It looks like it has an edge that will support some milk jug cutting, but it doesn't have the refined edge or profile to really do some competition or high hacky choppy cutty stuff. But then again, it's more of a big refined axe than a sword per se. Anyway, I'm going to whack something with it and then I'm going to bring it in for cleaning. I just thought I would share it with you because it's been on my wall for a little while. Some folks have asked me about it, and there's, I guess, the story or what I know. Anyway, if you have more questions about it, throw in the commentary down below. For the moment, though, I'm going to take out a bottle and smack it. Exactly what I didn't want to do. Alright, sword friends, well, as you may or may not be able to see, it cut through the little cream container as well as my planter box well enough, and it didn't seem to damage the edge at all on either one of those targets. Now, I wish my aim was good enough to not necessarily damage the planter boxes or my furniture. I suppose that's why I'm not allowed to cut inside anymore. Point is, though, that it seems to hold an edge well and seems to cut reasonably well, and honestly, it wasn't as hard to start and stop as I expected. Now, granted, I'm only cutting one target, and I'm kind of starting from a primed position, but nevertheless, it was comfortable enough to cut with, and I wish I didn't hit my planter box, but c'est la vie. Anyway, I'm going to clean this up and pretend like it never happened and totally not tell my wife, and that's just all I've got for you. If you have questions about the particular sword, throw them in the commentary down below. I'll do my best to answer them. Anyway, that's all I've got for today. Cheers, and thanks for watching.